I'm Luke Fuffle, and first, a warning. This theory is wild, and is much less my genuine belief regarding what will happen in the upcoming chapters, and more a fun exercise in theory crafting. One which serves to prove how little we actually know about where this story will go. Also, massive spoilers for Deltarune chapters 1 through 4, and perhaps 5 and beyond. Don't you feel like there's a few too many parallels between Kris and the Roaring Knight? The Knight immediately, the first time we see them, is striking a very familiar pose, the one Kris hits when they reunite with their friends in the Dark World. During the ensuing battle, the Knight's movements continue to mirror Kris's, especially obvious with their point. Both characters are extremely agile and nimble, both use a sword, both have a more condensed way of dodging projectiles, and both are of course knights. But the most interesting parallel to me comes at the end of the Shadow Mantle minigame. Hero Sword Kris, who is confirmed to be a separate entity from the Kris we know, slashes Susie and Ralse. Tenna, who tells them he did everything they wanted, is killed next, right before Hero Sword Kris moves to the right, out of the dark, into the light world, and down into the shelter. These actions are exactly the ones the Knight takes only a little while after. Now, if Hero Sword Kris is an alternate version of Kris, perhaps that tells us more than we think about the character whose actions they're paralleling. Perhaps we were wrong all along, and the Roaring Knight was never the Kris we control, but a different Kris. One who failed to save their world. What you receive from Hero Sword Kris's prophetic enactment is the Shadow Mantle, an item which makes it far easier to survive against the Knight, which means you can get the chapter's Shadow Crystal. These items are directly tied to the Knight, but also closely connected to Gaster. The two characters' connections don't stop there. Looking at their hands, there's a clear design crossover with the holes in their palms. It's interesting then that when Kris holds the Shadow Crystal in the light world, when it becomes glass, they're able to look into it and see through their hand. They appear to see Noelle pressed close against them, whispering. If they are followed by Susie, they see her looking at them coldly, when in reality she's smiling. In a book in the Church Dark World, we read this. So wept the fallen star, making rivers with its tears, and from the bitter water something grew. It looked like glass. One of the first things we see the Roaring Knight do is weep, drawing an immediate connection to this line. If the Knight is indeed this fallen Kris, and the Shadow Crystals are a product of theirs, then what if Kris is getting a glimpse of the Knight's timeline, of what they could have gone through? This also lines up with the current theory that the girl in the prophecy refers to Noelle, since she could have been in this alternate Kris's party instead of Susie, meaning the two would have never become best friends. Susie plays an extremely important role in the Deltarune we know. She's also the only reason the party is able to get 2 of the 4 existing Shadow Crystals. Gerson describes her as being the dragon from the stories inspired by the prophecy, a character important to the story but not a member of the hero's party. This makes sense since as a party member she actively rejects the player's control and often steers the story in unexpected directions. Her presence appears to be crucial in subverting both the Roaring and potentially whatever terrifying alternative the end of the prophecy might provide, as shown by the fact that the party is only able to down the Titan thanks to her and Gerson's combined efforts. The Knight's motivations of summoning said Titan are vague at best. If all they wanted was to start the Roaring, they could have done so 10 times over by now. Which leads me to believe that this was more of a test, an attempt to gauge the strength of our heroes, to see if this timeline where Susie has joined the main party could turn out differently. This could also explain Gerson's mysterious presence, as the Knight could be aware of his strength and want him present as a backup if the main party's efforts aren't enough. But whether all of this is true or not, the Knight's intentions are still confusing, and compounded by the fact that they themselves look very similar to the Titans that appear in Ralse's version of the prophecy. When they summon the Titan we see in Chapter 4, it first appears like a human head shrouded in shadow. We don't know what Titans are, but this implies that they are somehow related to humanity, on top of being directly tied to the Roaring. Perhaps the Roaring Knight is a title which holds a different meaning than we thought it did. Perhaps it means less a knight trying to cause the Roaring, and more a night distorted and warped by the roaring. Someone who was once human. With the holes in their hands and the heavy breathing that plays when they enter, maybe Gaster was able to use this Kris's determination to save their life while twisting them into something darker. Something he would know how to do all too well if Undertale's true lab is any indication. Taking this angle of a warped Kris could also explain the rest of the knight's appearance. The antlers could be a manifestation of their guilt, a distorted version of the horns they would wear as a child, twisted to appear similar to those of the person whose disappearance they blame themselves for. But of course, this missing person is the most popular theory for the actual identity of the knight: December holiday. To be clear, I really do understand all the evidence supporting this and followed this train of thought literally a week ago. I think in regards to character, she would be the most likely, but I don't believe she would be in regards to context. The whole theme of Dess's story so far is centered around a need to find her. The Roaring Knight has no need to be found, and I wouldn't describe them as a lost girl in any traditional sense. Only if lost is referring to a loss of self, but with such an emphasis on Dess's disappearance, I can't fully buy into that. There's also the voice in the code. If we assume this voice is Des, then these lines would need to be non-linear if she is to be the knight. And how could they be non-linear when Spamton picks up her communication in real time? Well then, what about the other two holiday contenders, Carol and Rudy? I feel like they fit more in context but less in character. Looking at the knight's actions and movements, they're kind of cocky, juvenile, constantly taking opportunities to look cool for no benefit or purpose, like goading on Susie as she chases them up the stairs by striking the same pose she would. Carol is extremely matter-of-fact and efficient. Rudy is deeply ill. I really don't think either of them would be wasting time like this. These actions fit what little we know about Dess's character, but again, her context doesn't quite line up. The two primary pieces of evidence people point to support a holiday identity are the antlers, which I don't believe to be literal as they're a part of the helmet portion of a very amorphous design, and of course, the weapon. For a brief moment when it first manifests out of the knight's palm, it takes on the shape of a baseball bat, imagery directly tied to December. Through the rest of the battle, it appears similar to a katana, which Carol has hanging in her kitchen. I could see an intent of bringing this imagery to mind, but I don't believe it's meant to be either a bat or a katana. Let's not forget the song playing during this fight is called Black Knife, and as the prophecy says, the knight which makes with blackened knife. The knight also drops the black shard, a weapon which Kris can use as a sword. As such, I believe that the knight's weapon is meant to be a cross between a sword and a knife. There's a weapon known as the Shashka. It is a curved blade with no guard and a swept hilt, which appears similar to the knight's blade in many instances, especially in its idol sprite. Designed to be a cutter, it's a blade meant for quick and efficient slicing. The word Shashka comes from this Adige word, which translates in English to long knife. I'm not saying this is the exact inspiration for the knight's blade. I don't think it is. The point is that we need to broaden our horizons and take into consideration options other than the ones that we jump to first. And I guess that's the point of this whole theory, really. Do I really think alternate Kris will actually be the Roaring Knight? Chances are slim, but I'd argue they're about as slim as Des or Carol being the knight. There's so little we know about this story and where it will go, so let's not so aggressively assign ourselves to one school of thought. Let's allow theorizing to be what it's meant to be, pure speculative fun, and an opportunity to view a story we love through a perspective we never would have viewed it before. If that's the vibe you're down for, and if you made it to the end of this video, I'm sure you are, subscribe and stick around. Like the video if you feel so inclined, and look forward to coming theories that are just as wild. One featuring Des and our old friend, the Vessel. But as for alternate Kris, I'll leave you with one last image. After downing Tenna, the Roaring Knight prepares to encounter the people they once knew well. In preparation, they strike the pose most familiar to them, the one they'd strike when preparing to join their friends on another adventure. But slowly, the realization dawns on them. These aren't their friends. They are alone and trapped in a present that forces their hand to fight for a future they'll never attain. And in this brief, flickering moment of clarity, they fall out of the past and begin to weep. Thanks for watching.